Good evening. I'm Paul Harris, Group Editor of the Jewish Telegraph, and I'm speaking this evening not as a journalist, but as somebody very, very concerned about the case of Beth Alexander and her beautiful boys. I first met Beth Alexander and her twin sons Sammy and Benji more than 8 years ago in a Vienna hotel lobby. I had decided to investigate for myself what was being termed a tug-of-love story, but which, quite frankly, I didn't really believe, feeling that both parties must be at least equally to blame. I was soon disabused of that notion. I was immediately struck by how careworn and exhausted Beth appeared. I was equally aware of the lethargy of the two boys who just sat there without saying a word or attempting to tear around as most lively 4-year-olds would. I was aware that Beth was glancing around nervously. Later, she confided that she was worried anyone would see her talking to me and report the fact to her ex-husband. The interview I did with Beth that afternoon in November 2013 was the start of a friendship between us, not as a journalist and a subject, but as a human being who wanted to right a dreadful wrong perpetrated against a young mother by what I saw as an uncaring, xenophobic Jewish community and an apparently corrupt legal system supported by equally flawed social services, both of which were content to deprive a loving, caring mother of her inalienable right to raise her two sons and grant custody to a husband who had been abusive towards her. Parental alienation is something shocking, but that is what Beth suffered, nearly 1,000 miles from her family and friends in Manchester, and with visitation rights of just a few hours a week. And that alienation continues until now on an even more insidious scale. The contact with Sammy and Benji initially allowed unsupervised overnight stays, but was soon reduced to sporadic supervised sessions, not in Beth's warm home, full of the twins' toys and their two tiny beds, but in a sterile visitation centre with a social worker observing every move and conversation. The courts and social services were fed a litany of untruths about Beth and her mental condition, supposedly. Even those she had considered to be friends and in whom she confided were actually working against her, aiding and abetting her ex-husband in an attempt to ensure that she was not only divorced from him, but entirely from her beautiful twins. They finally succeeded, and Beth, who had by then returned to Britain and qualified as a family lawyer, was banned by an Austrian court from having any contact whatsoever with Sammy and Benji. No letters, no greetings cards, no video calls, no telephone calls. Unlike most of those who have tried to help Beth over the years, I've seen her with the twins, in her own home and outside. I witnessed the deep love they have for her and she for them, and the fun they had together. That is why I do not accept the testimony allegedly given to the court by the twins that they did not want any contact with their mother whatsoever. I know that cannot possibly be true, and the only way they could have made such statements would have been as a result of malign coercion. A matter of just weeks ago, a Facebook page was launched. It now has 5,000 members, all of whom support Beth's endeavour to bring her twins back to her. The outpouring of support from people in all walks of life, male and female, young and old, has been heartening, but all have offered their support because they have realised the gross miscarriage of justice that has occurred, which has not only left a loving mother bereft, but has caused severe collateral damage to two innocent boys. The video that follows demonstrates the strength of that support, but nothing is more powerful in it than hearing the raw emotion of Beth herself. At the conclusion of the video, we will let you know how everyone can help reunite Beth and her beautiful twins.
I'm Beth, and I'm Sammy and Benji's mum. I grew up as an Orthodox Jewish girl, and like many of my friends, I got married young to someone that I thought was a religious guy. After the wedding, I moved to his community in Vienna to set up what I naively hoped would be a happy and loving home. It all turns out to be a sham, and I found myself trapped in an abusive marriage, far away from home, far from my family and friends. The least that I'd hoped for was that once the marriage had ended, I'd finally be safe and that I'd be able to keep my babies safe. Nothing could have been further from the truth. My beautiful babies were snatched from my arms by 4 armed policemen when they were 2 years old. And I now find myself having to beg and grovel just for access. The latest Austrian court ruling has now denied me all contact to my sons. I'm an example of what can happen when those in positions of power and trust abuse the faith that's been placed in them. I'm speaking out because there are thousands of women around the world, just like me, who have been shamed into silence.
From the moment I first heard about Beth's story some years ago, I was extremely saddened to hear about her plight and the plight of her sons. All of us who know Beth know her to be a loving, caring and giving person, and most importantly of all, a wonderful and loving mother. And the fact that she has been separated from her children and has not been part of their lives for so long has been a most terrible tragedy. Now that Samuel and Benjamin's bar mitzvah is approaching, it is inconceivable that such a formative part of their lives should pass without her involvement, without her presence, both in the lead up to their big day and also on the day itself. It is for this reason that I've been trying to do whatever I can in order to help Beth and her campaign. And I implore all of you, wherever you might be, to do likewise.
No mother should have to face what Beth has been through. It's an injustice both to her and her boys who've been sadly deprived of their mum for so long. At Jewish Women's Aid, unfortunately, we are all too familiar with what can happen to women after separating from their partner, and we call upon the Austrian courts to revisit this case and allow Beth to reunite with her boys. We also call upon the Austrian Jewish community to join in supporting Beth, who only wants to be a mother to her children again.
My name is Matthew Wofford. I'm Beth Alexander's local MP. I'm supporting Beth in her attempts to gain custody of her twin sons. Her predicament, and those of many others like her, should not be happening in a fair and civilised country. I'm shocked that Austria's legal system has permitted this situation to continue to the point where Beth is no longer allowed any contact with her sons. This is not justice, and I will be raising Beth's case with the UK government and asking them to put further pressure on the Austrian government to recognise the outrageous unfairness of the situation and take appropriate action to end this tragic state of affairs.
All I want is to be a mother to my babies and nurture them and support them as they approach their bar mitzvah and in the coming years.
Is there anyone who cannot be profoundly moved by what they've just heard? The objective is clear: to reunite Beth with her boys. And that is what the Facebook page is now being renamed. And many thanks to Tanya Duman for her efforts in helping establish it. Please write to the president of the Vienna Jewish community, Oskar Deutsch, that's Deutsch, urging the community's religious and lay leaders to use their authority and influence to end this injustice. At every stage, the court has been influenced by senior people within the Austrian community who have sided with the father and not the children, and directly against Beth herself. As I said earlier, the courts and social services were fed a litany of untruths about Beth's mental health and her inability to be a mother. She was fighting a losing battle against people who were determined to alienate someone who was not one of their own. The twins' father has been given the power by the court to allow Beth into their lives and end this agony, but he chooses to ignore all requests and continue to punish Beth, at the same time punishing Sammy and Benji too, by depriving them of their mother and seemingly poisoning their minds against her. Over the past 10 years, every avenue has been explored via politicians, rabbis, and communal leaders from throughout the world, but to no avail because Beth is still alienated from her children and they from her. When I offered to introduce tonight's video and launch the campaign, Beth asked me whether I would be compromising my editorial impartiality by so doing. I have to say I am not impartial in this case. I'm foursquare behind Beth and will continue to campaign editorially and personally until Beth has her children home with her and so that she can lavish on them the love and care of which they have been deprived for a decade. Thank you for listening. Let's all fight with Beth until justice is seen to be done and she is reunited with Sammy and Benji.